Hey folks, good morning and welcome to this episode of Motorcyclist MC Commute. Today we're going to be riding BMW's 2021 R18 Classic. This is a more touring friendly variation of BMW Motorrad's ultra powerful, ultra big, ultra heavyweight R18 cruiser. Let's swing a leg over this bad boy and see what it's like to ride. All right, folks, there it is, BMW's 2021 R18 Classic heavyweight boxer twin powered cruiser. Now, this particular R18 Classic is part of the Motorrad division's 4-bike R18 heavyweight cruiser lineup. We had the R18, which we test rode last season. We have the R18 Classic, which goes up against motorcycles like the Bar and Shield brand's Heritage Special, and the Indian Super Chief, which we also test rode earlier this year. Then we have the R18B, which is a heavyweight bagger style motorcycle. We haven't reviewed that vehicle yet, but we will soon. And then we have the R18 Transcontinental, which is a heavyweight full dresser luxury touring rig, which we have reviewed a few months ago. Make sure to review our content here on this channel and motorcyclistonline.com. I really like this motorcycle. Every time I pull up to a fuel station to gas up the 4.2 gallon fuel tank, it's really interesting how even non-motorcyclists will go up to me and be like, wow, that motorcycle, it looks old, but it's new. Like BMW Motorrad designers in Germany just nailed it on the styling. The styling of this bike is just awesome. Obviously, the 1802cc Boxer Twin is really the showcase of this vehicle. And just look at its mechanical and design brilliance. It just looks so pretty. No wires hanging out, no goofy things, just clean mechanical beauty. A very nice looking engine. We have the reverse lever here. That's right, this 805-pound bike has electronic reverse, and you're going to need it because this bike is heavy. Now, compared to the R18, this vehicle is equipped with a 16-inch front wheel instead of a 19-inch. I like this 16-inch wheel. Usually I'm not a small diameter wheel kind of guy, but for this motorcycle, it works very well. It just makes for a much more agile and playful, if you can even call a heavyweight cruiser that, attitude. This bike also has a gargantuan windscreen. I love this windscreen. It does a great job of blocking the elements. My only complaint is I wish it had some level of adjustment. Instead, it's fixed. We also have these nice saddlebags here that have these nice leather buckles with these plastic snaps. That makes it easy to put your stuff in and out of the vehicle. These plastic snaps snap out so you can carry your goodies when you are away from the bike. This is the key. I know we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but this is the key. And look, the key resembles the front of the engine. How cool is that? BMW Motorrad definitely paid attention to the details on this bike. I love the bright LED lighting. I love those LED fog lights that just really do a great job of lighting up the road after dark. Well, folks, enough blabbing about this vehicle from BMW. Let's swing a leg over this thing and see what it's like to ride. All right, folks, here we go aboard BMW Motorrad's 2021 R18 Classic. We showed you the electronic key fob, which is coincidentally styled like the fuel tank on the 1936 R5, which this motorcycle is loosely based off stylistically. It also matches the front of the engine, which we showed. Fire up the starter button, listen to that 110 cubic inch engine roar. I love when you twist the throttle, the engine rotates on its longitudinal axis slightly. Good character, kind of nice subtle detail that lets this heavyweight cruiser stand apart in the segment. Sitting on this motorcycle, this bike benefits from a very low seat. The seat's nice and low. The dish of the saddle, it really supports my rear end well. It almost feels like I'm in it's like someone's cupping my butt almost. I like the bend of this handlebar. This handlebar is awesome. It's really wide. It's got a good amount of rearward sweep, which is quite nice for this type of heavyweight cruiser application. Nice wide handlebar. You can use a Torx bit to loosen these 4 clamp fasteners and actually rotate the bar forward or aft. If you were a taller guy, I think rotating this bar forward would be a good modification for you. I really wouldn't want to move the handlebar any far more rearward. It would just basically feel like these bars are in my lap, and I don't like that riding sensation. This vehicle has mid-style controls because of the position of this engine's cylinders in the flat position, one piston there, one piston there. You cannot have forward controls on this vehicle because the cylinders are in the way. So not the best for super cruising, but for all intensive purposes it isn't so bad. Right now we are operating this vehicle in stop and go style traffic. This is literally the worst condition for operating this vehicle, just because those cylinders, they generate a lot of heat when you're going slow in traffic. All of the engine heat literally radiates onto your feet and it gets uncomfortable quick. But that's only if you are in stop and go traffic. As soon as you get some airflow against those cylinders, that discomfort just evaporates. But to be fair, on a really hot day, you're still gonna feel a little bit of heat on your feet. That's really my only real big gripe on this vehicle, is that. Now, riding this motorcycle, I just love this 1802cc Boxer Twin. BMW has been crafting this Boxer Twin engine configuration in its German factory for 98 years. 98-year history making this engine. I love when manufacturers, or any company for that matter, takes pride in its history and takes pride in making a product, whatever that product is, and just fine-tuning it and over and over and over and over and over and through the decades and decades and decades. And these Boxer Twins are just so awesome because not only do they look and sound totally cool, but they have just a whopping amount of torque. This R18 Classic puts out over 100 pound-feet of torque at the business end of the Bridgestone H50 cruiser tire. Over 100 pound-feet of torque. That's as much torque as Honda's Goldwing 6-cylinder. It's unbelievable how much torque this engine is capable of in an air oil cooled format. 6-speed gearbox puts power back to the tire. This motorcycle features a beautiful mechanical drive shaft. So there's like an automobile style drive shaft hanging off the right side of the swing arm, and that transfers engine power through the transmission and back to the rear wheel. The shaft drive, the mechanical shaft drive, is virtually maintenance free, and it's made of metal, so theoretically it's never going to fail. The only serviceable item is that rear differential inside the wheel. You're supposed to change the fluid inside that every 24,000 miles. So besides that, the powertrain is virtually maintenance free. Really awesome. I love the way the transmission feels. It's got a nice solid shift between gears. I like that this particular R18 Classic's fitted with a heel shifter, so you can just press down on the heel shifter and the motorcycle will upshift into the next gear. I love the extreme synchronization between the control surfaces of this vehicle, whether it's the ride-by-wire throttle, which is just has magnificent calibration and response, to the hydraulically actuated clutch. This clutch is really responsive. The throttle, clutch, gear shifter, you can have extreme control on this motorcycle. I'm not used to operating a heavyweight cruiser that has this much synchronization between controls. You can really overlap the controls well on this bike, and it has a lot of feel. I'm a motorcycle rider who literally lives and dies by feel. If I want to have a good experience, my motorcycle has to have a ton of feel, and this motorcycle has a ton of feel for a cruiser. So good job, Motorrad department. Right now we are riding in the rain power setting. That is the softest throttle response, the softest engine map. You can also choose from roll, which is a little bit firmer, and then rock is the most aggressive. I like rock overall. There's not a huge difference between each of these settings, but rock just gives the engine a little bit more of a aggressive feel, but not overly aggressive like it's gonna get away from you, but it just makes it a little bit more fun to ride. And I just love the power pulses that this bike is capable of. You got to remember, this engine benefits from a bore measurement that's over 4 inches. It's got coffee can size pistons going back and forth, slamming back and forth, and just making a ton of power. And I just love just the whole dynamic of this engine. It not only sounds cool, the engine vibration is tuned very well. You definitely feel engine vibration through the controls, but it's manufactured in such a way that complements the ride. Other heavyweight cruiser manufacturers, their engines vibrate too, but they vibrate in a way that's just almost disorganized. It's just like there's vibration there just because there is. Where this powertrain, the vibration feels like it's tuned for the actual riding experience. The Tuning Fork brand is very good at doing that same thing, where they're literally tuning the power character and the vibration character of their engine to the application. And I really like just the power pulses of this engine and the way it vibrates. It just feels right to me. It feels really good. This motorcycle with a full 4.2 gallons of fuel weighs 805 pounds. This motorcycle is definitely not a featherweight. You definitely feel its weight when you're lifting it up off the side stand. But in motion, I'm really impressed with how maneuverable this bike is. Now the R18 comes with a 19-inch front wheel. This R18 Classic is fitted with 16-inch wheels front and rear. And I'm not normally a 16-inch wheel kind of guy, but on this bike I like it a lot because it just makes for a motorcycle that's exceptionally agile. I can't believe how easy this motorcycle is to steer and put where I want on the road. Yet even with that smaller diameter wheel set, because the tires have such a big sidewall, it still goes over bumps reasonably well. Now, aside from the configuration of the engine and stop and go traffic and the heat that engine puts out on you,
The other weak link, if any, on this bike is just the limited suspension travel. These vehicles are designed to look like bobber style motorcycles, which traditionally are devoid of rear suspension travel. This bike has 3.5 inches of suspension travel, which, although I love the stance of this bike and the way it sits, it looks, the 3.5 inches of suspension travel definitely will beat you up faster than if it had full length suspension. Still, despite its more limited rear suspension travel, the suspension calibration on this bike is actually good. The compression and rebound damping, it follows the attitude of the road well, and you can ride this bike surprisingly hard. The crazy thing though is the limited ground clearance. This bike has no ground clearance. This bike, it's almost like they took the old Harley Davidson Heritage Classic, which before the Softail redesign, that bike was useless. It had no ground clearance. It's almost like they baselined that bike, because the new Softail based Heritage Classic that they unveiled for the 2018 model year, that bike actually has some ground clearance now, more than this one, which this bike directly competes against. So a little bit odd. But even though this bike doesn't have the most ground clearance, I'm really amazed at how stable this chassis is. As long as you keep this bike more or less straight up or down, you can ride this bike insanely hard. This bike is capable of going over 115 miles per hour, and at 115 miles per hour, it's just absurd how stable it is, how smooth and steadfast the chassis is. You add cruise control, which is part of the Select package, and that makes things even better. I love BMW cruise control, super easy to use. Turn it off by just applying the brakes or activating the clutch lever. These power pulses of this engine are just mesmerizing. Such a fun cruiser bike to ride. And away we go, guys. I love how positive feeling that clutch lever is. You really have good feel between clutch release and throttle application. It just makes this motorcycle really easy to launch. Now back to the limited ground clearance. That is certainly an Achilles heel on this R18 Classic, but the high level of stability is totally awesome. As long as you keep this bike straight up and down, you can ride it extremely hard. I love that this bike comes outfitted with dual disc front brakes. All heavyweight cruiser motorcycles made in the world today should have double disc brakes. If your heavyweight cruiser doesn't have double disc brakes, you are just failing miserably. And that extra brake hardware gives this bike more effective stopping capability. Earlier in the week when I was riding this bike, a car pulled out in front of me in an aggressive way, and I had to slam on the brakes, and I was really happy that I had dual disc front brakes. It allowed me to slow the bike down more effectively. I also like that this bike has matching calipers and rotors on all sides, so the rear brake is very powerful too. You have to remember, you're trying to slow down an 805 motorcycle. You need to have heavy duty braking components, and this bike, while they're not street bike, high performance street bike brakes, they're definitely good for a cruiser. I also like that the brake sensation feeling is, this kind of sounds silly, but the brake sensation feeling is a little bit dull, which that sounds bad, but with these cruiser V-twin bikes, just they've always been a little bit dull. That's just how they are. You have to tug on the lever a little bit to get these bikes slowed down, and BMW engineered some of that into this bike. Yet you really start pulling back on that lever, on that front brake lever, and power ramps up quickly. So you get the best of both worlds. You get really soft, borderline dull feeling initial bite, but the more you depress that lever, the more the stopping power, which is what it should be. This bike is a little bit big, so getting through this competition traffic's always a little bit of a bear. There's a Harley Davidson guy. We just smoked him. I don't even know what he was on. I think a Breakout was that bike. Now this nice instrument gauge keeps tabs on the vehicle settings. We have a nice analog speedometer. I love that this motorcycle goes over 115 miles per hour stably. That is an awesome feature for me. This bike includes trip meters, so you can keep a track on your mileage, average speed. We've been averaging 34 miles per gallon on this bike, but to be fair, we've been riding it at relatively high speeds. So 34 miles per gallon at a relatively high average speed. I guess it's not that high because our average speed, just what we listed before, was 43. And a 4.2 gallon fuel tank is what feeds this motorcycle. I love that this bike runs on 87 octane fuel. Bikes like this, relatively low performance bikes like these kind of cruisers, they should run on 87 octane. The only kind of bikes that should be running on premium octane are motocross bikes and sport bikes with high compression ratios. Everything else should be running just fine on 87 octane. And I like that this bike runs perfectly on that lower specification fuel. We rode this motorcycle after dark. I love the LED headlamps on this bike. BMW always kills it with this lighting, and this R18 Classic's no different. The LED headlight throws off a nice deep swath of light. These fog light style lights that you activate with the switch here, they're just awesome. They allow for an even wider spread of light. And this motorcycle also benefits from adaptive cornering head beams, part of the premium package on this motorcycle. It's about a $1,500 option, and that allows the motorcycle, the headlight, to light up the outer edge of the headlight going through corners. So if you're going through a left corner, the left outer edge lights up, brightening the corner. If you go to the right, vice versa. It's really nice technology. My only gripe is I wish its cornering headlights were brighter. I guess engineers didn't anticipate a heavyweight cruiser rider to ride this motorcycle that quickly in corners, but I just like riding bikes fast all the time, day or night, doesn't matter what they are. And the cornering headlight function on this bike could be brighter, which is kind of insane because this bike actually has pretty limited cornering clearance. But even with this cornering clearance, the cornering headlamp functionality is still not bright enough. But as long as you're going in a straight line, this thing throws off some lumens. I really like that. I also really like that the LED tail lights and the brake light are all one piece. There's no separate brake light. The brake light's just integrated right in the tail lights, just like BMW is doing with all of its other motorcycles. It's super awesome. Looks super cool. Let's let her eat. Yes. This BMW vehicle is outfitted with stability control. It's almost like a form of traction control. It's always on. You can manually disable it by pushing this button on the left switch gear if you want to do burnouts and that kind of thing. This motorcycle is also equipped with always-on ABS. Always-on ABS, and it also has a form of linked brakes where when you actuate the front brake and the rear brake, they will actuate independently unless the software in the vehicle tells that the chassis is unbalanced. Then it will automatically route brake pressure to the opposing brake system just to help the BMW R18 Classic rider have more control. The system works seamlessly and you can't ever really feel it in effect. But to be fair, when you're riding these big heavyweight cruisers, you really got to ride them smooth if you want to go fast on them. You can't do the ham-fisted control inputs that you could on a more sporty vehicle, just because the chassis is just not, you can't handle that kind of control input. Maintenance on this vehicle, we talked about the final drive and how you have to change the oil inside that rear hub every 24,000 miles. This bike also requires engine oil changes every 6,000 miles. Every 6,000 miles you drop the engine oil. BMW Motorrad also says you need to inspect the valve clearances on its 4-valve cylinder heads every 6,000 miles, which is kind of crazy. 6,000 mile valve clearance inspection, that's pretty short. It's interesting to see how BMW factored that in. This bike, this engine has just over 1 gallon of oil inside its engine cases. Engine oil not only lubricates the mechanical surfaces inside the engine, but it also cools the engine. It's got a decently sized oil cooler on the chin of the bike too, to help keep the engine oil temperature within specification. Fit and finish on this motorcycle, that's where this cruiser really stands apart from the competition. This bike, just the craftsmanship on this bike is just downright excellent. From the fit and finish of the metal parts to the way everything is just perfectly assembled and put together. There's no huge gaps, nothing feels loose and cheap. This is a very premium feeling motorcycle. Really what BMW's done is they're offering CVO, Harley-Davidson CVO levels of craftsmanship on all of its R18 cruiser bikes, which is amazing because CVO motorcycles cost upwards of $30,000, $40,000 now, and these BMW Motorrad R18 cruisers have that type of craftsmanship for a much lower price, which is insane because these motorcycles are built in Berlin, Germany. So they have to be built in Berlin, Germany and shipped all the way to the United States, and they're still somehow less expensive. Unbelievable. I just love cruising on this thing. And with the addition of this fixed windscreen, it just makes it so much more comfortable. Yes, I wish it was height adjustable. If it was height adjustable, that would just be totally awesome. But with the addition of this fixed windscreen and those decently sized saddlebags, I spend all day riding this motorcycle. I cruise all around Southern California on this motorcycle. This motorcycle, with the addition of the windscreen and the saddlebags, just makes it 100 times more practical than the traditional R18. And yet it doesn't detract from its looks. This is a very good looking bike. In my opinion, it looks even better than the R18. Love letting this 1802cc engine eat. Dinner is served. Dinner is served. fluid. I was trying to do a sick burnout. I failed miserably. Oh well, maybe next time. Well, folks, there it is. BMW's 2021 R18 Classic. That was a fun ride on this heavyweight cruiser. I just love this bike. I love the way it looks. I love the styling attributes of this vehicle. Its engine, the mechanical exposed drive shaft, the double loop frame, just the whole proportions, the way this motorcycle is put together, the fit and finish, the sound, the extremely well honed character of the engine. I love that it's got a windshield so you can actually go places on it. I love that it's got these easy to use double buckle plastic buckle saddlebags with the removable inserts. I can literally run errands in Southern California. I can visit friends. I can bring things with me. I like this motorcycle a lot. This particular vehicle rings in at $24,000. So the base R18 Classic registers at $19,000, almost $20,000 for the base one, $19,500 I believe it is. This one with the premium package, which adds reverse and the adaptive cornering headlamps and the select package with its heated grips and those awesome fog lights, that tacks on another couple $1,000. The one option that I wouldn't really spring for is the $2,000 optional white pinstriping and chrome kit. I could do without that. To me, that's just, it's a misuse of $2,000. The premium package though and the select package I absolutely would fully invest in if this motorcycle was mine. That said, would I spend $24,000 on this bike? I wouldn't. I get it without the pinstripe and chrome package and get the bike for $22,015. That's how I configure it. But for $22,015, I would absolutely buy this bike. I like this bike a lot. It looks totally awesome. It sounds totally awesome. It has reasonable comfort as long as you don't ride in stop and go traffic. I do not ride motorcycles in stop and go traffic. That's not how my lifestyle is designed. So I would buy this motorcycle. I like it a lot. Well, folks, that's a wrap from today's MC Commute review. Log on to motorcyclistonline.com to read all of our content on this vehicle and the other variations of the R18 and the R18 Transcontinental. And give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, thumbs it down if you didn't, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for tuning in.